What happens when a film borrows too heavily from its predecessor's playbook? Today we're exploring how My Oxford Year might be less a fresh romance and more an unintentional remake of Me Before You, right down to its most controversial choices. My Oxford Year follows Anna de la Vega, played by Sophia Carson, an ambitious American Rhodes Scholar studying Victorian poetry at Oxford. She meets Jamie Davenport, played by Corey Milaquist, a charming DPhil student who teaches one of her classes. Their banter to romance arc gets complicated when Anna discovers Jamie has terminal cancer, the same aggressive genetic disease that killed his brother Eddie. Despite knowing his time is limited, Anna chooses to stay with him through his final months. Jamie refuses further treatment, reconciles with his estranged father, and dies peacefully in Anna's arms. The film ends with Anna staying in Oxford to teach Jamie's former class, carrying forward his legacy. Sound familiar? That's because Me Before You told nearly the same story. Louisa Clerk, played by Amelia Clerk, becomes caregiver to Will Traynor, played by Sam Claflin, a quadriplegic former banker. They fall deeply in love, but Will has already scheduled his assisted suicide in Switzerland. Despite Lou's efforts to show him life is worth living, Will follows through with his decision. Lou is devastated, but uses the inheritance he left her to pursue her dreams and live boldly, exactly as he wanted. Both films center on protagonists who fall for men with terminal conditions and face the same heartbreaking reality: their partners have already decided to die. The narrative structure is identical: meet-cutes, growing intimacy, devastating revelation, desperate hope, inevitable loss. Even specific story beats align: the estranged father storyline, the partner's initial coldness masking deeper pain, the protagonist's life-changing decision to stay despite knowing how it ends. The key difference lies in the medical details rather than emotional trajectory. Jamie refuses further cancer treatment after watching his brother suffer through experimental drugs, while Will chooses euthanasia after years of paralysis. But both deaths serve the same narrative function: teaching the female protagonist to live fully through loss. Anna stays in Oxford and becomes a teacher. Lou travels to Paris and pursues new dreams. The men die so the women can be reborn. Perhaps most troubling is how My Oxford Year seems to have learned nothing from Me Before You's backlash. The film from 2016 sparked widespread criticism from disability rights activists who argued it promoted the harmful message that disabled lives aren't worth living. Protests were held in multiple cities, with groups like Not Dead Yet condemning the portrayal of Will's suicide as romantic and noble. Critics specifically took issue with how the film framed disability as a burden and death as liberation, with the casting of able-bodied Sam Claflin in a quadriplegic role adding insult to injury. Author Jojo Moyes defended the story as being about one man's personal choice, not a statement on all disabled lives, but the damage was done. My Oxford Year walks into the same minefield. The film has faced criticism for recycling harmful tropes about illness, particularly using a terminal diagnosis primarily as an emotional device rather than exploring the lived reality of being sick. Jamie's cancer functions less as a medical condition and more as a plot mechanism to create tragedy and teach Anna life lessons. The disability community's concerns about Me Before You apply equally here. When will Hollywood stop using illness and death as narrative shortcuts to learning life lessons? The most damning evidence that My Oxford Year fails as its own film? Viewers immediately recognized the similarities, with one user writing on social media, "I think I've seen this film before, and I didn't like the ending." When your audience experiences déjà vu, you haven't created something new, you've accidentally remade something that already exists. Critics noted the film suffered from a lack of emotional depth and was dramatically inert, earning just 29% on Rotten Tomatoes. The Oxford setting and academic trappings can't disguise the recycled emotional core. Unlike Me Before You, which at least had Amelia Clark and Sam Claflin's chemistry to elevate predictable material, My Oxford Year has been criticized for flat performances that fail to sell even the borrowed emotional beats. The film also inherits Me Before You's most problematic element: the suggestion that loving someone with a terminal illness is primarily about what you learn from their death. Both Anna and Lou are positioned as the real protagonists, with Jamie and Will serving as beautiful, doomed teachers whose purpose is transformation through loss. It's tragedy as self-help seminar, where My Oxford Year could have distinguished itself, perhaps by giving Jamie more agency in his story, or exploring Anna's ambitions beyond their relationship, or actually grappling with medical ethics. It instead follows the established template beat for beat. Even the ending feels borrowed. The bittersweet conclusion where the survivor carries forward the deceased's legacy, having learned learned to live authentically through grief. My Oxford year doesn't just echo Me Before You, it practically photocopies it, complete with the same controversial choices and emotional manipulation. Nearly a decade after disability activists protested outside Me Before You premieres, Hollywood is still telling the same story about terminal illness as a vehicle for someone else's growth. At what point does inspiration become replication? And most importantly, when does homage become plagiarism? This is Ladies First, watching women in movies. Here, we empower women by reviewing and discussing films that highlight their stories, struggles, and achievements. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.